Welcome, my name is Dr. Dean and I'm here with my friend Venzel.
Nice to meet everyone again.
Yeah, today we are going to expand on the core neutral concept. So
Exactly.
we have a couple of videos they're very brief or we've discussed core neutral sort of woven in with other concepts, but what we want to do today is kind of open up that door, open up the aperture, right? Give you a bigger lens into core recruitment, or we call it core neutrality. In the CoreX system theory, it's just called core neutral, right? So core is nothing new, right? It's been discussed many, many times.
Yeah. Multiple videos.
Right, but I mean even in the industry, right?
Yeah.
In exercise, in sports training, in rehab, post-surgical scenarios, right? There's a reestablishing core neutral. And so the problem is that a lot of us kind of miss the point of what core neutral is and why we need it and what it's all about. So the short list here for us, how we define it, or we decided not to define it first.
Yeah.
We're going to say this is what the core involves. Okay, so the first thing that the core involves is spinal stability. So what do we mean by spinal stability?
With spinal stability, basically what that means is when you're through gravity or any sports movement, you want to have stability through. We said before in a couple other videos, through actually the spine is actually loaded,
right?
And then it causes the compression in the spine that deals with kind of making the spine more rigid,
right?
And making sure we're upright and we don't teeter to a certain side or falter into a faulty movement pattern.
Right. So even like when we're in that core neutral position here, right? So the spine is in the center. And then when we hit like that drop step from core neutral, we come back here again, we're like in that 50-50, the spine is loaded top to bottom, right? Okay, so spinal stability, actually if you check out my podcasts, we did that podcast, Spinal Stability, part 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
So watch that podcast because it's amazing. Right? That the spinal stability part 1, 2, 3. Okay, so stop the video and go watch that and then come back. Okay, so because we want to stay on core neutral. Okay, so we're going to say core neutral, core stability, core neutrality involves spinal stability. And then it also involves ground force reaction. And then we were just kind of putting this together and I said, ooh, but what about
swimmers, like people who gravity is not going to be axially loaded,
right? Like you said.
So dealing with the sports force reaction,
right? Sports force reaction, not necessarily ground force reaction, because so we were talking about this, and I said swimming, and he said, well, like synchronized swimming is the perfect example because they're actually pushing quickly and suddenly and hard enough on the water to actually get the water to snap back, right, to create a force. And then diving, right? So you're in the air and you're using the reflex of the body sort of as its self ground force reaction, self-reacting. So we added, on top of ground force reaction, we sort of coined this actually about 10 minutes ago, sports force reaction. So overlap the core concept into any specific sport, and it absolutely has to have that. The next thing that's involved is that proximal to distal activation. So let's just show them quickly what that means. So proximal means he's going to activate, I'm going to point to the core area. Move over here a little bit. So, and turn this way. So he's going to activate this area, and then just put up your hand. So before he adds force here or load here, he's going to first load through the core, right? Bend your knees a little bit and then pitch forward from the hip a little bit. Good. He's going to activate here, activating his respiratory diaphragm, the pelvic floor, the transversus and the multifidus. Now you're going to get a better activation on the multifidus if I try to force rotate you, right? If I try to rotate, you're going to hit the multifidus are going to wake up more than if I push you back or pull you forward, right? So multifidus responds mostly to rotational forces. Okay, so he's going to cue here, then here, then here. Proximal to distal, so that's the sequence, that's the order. So what he, in trying to develop core neutrality or to activate the core, you don't want to force the hand first, then activate the shoulder and then the core. So the idea here is that it's proximal to distal activation. Okay, and then the next is, and this is really interesting, is this concept involving the transitional link. So we have the upper body and we have the lower body, right? And so we say that core activation must involve transitioning forces from the upper body to the lower body.
Slings.
Right?
Yep.
And that's activated through those myofascial slings, which are muscles that are coordinated together. We're going to get into that. We're going to actually tape some of these up so you can see what we're talking about. We're just talking about involvement without going into too much detail to start. So when I say transitional link, I'm talking about the upper and the lower, but I'm going to throw something else in there because we like to be creative, right? And break the rules, and we just wait. So we're not there yet, but we're going to talk about cornstarch.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, and cornstarch might change their whole life. I'm just saying it could.
Trust me, guys, you're going to want to stick around for that.
Okay, so I'm going to throw in there that the transitional link isn't just that myofascial integrative center between the lower body and the upper body. I'm going to say it's also the transitional link between making sure that your core activation and your sports activation transitional link is from unconscious to conscious, because you don't want any activity in athletics to be unconscious, right? So they talk about, and we talked about this eliteness before, right?
Yep.
So these athletes are trying to really like dial up their game to get to the top, right, of performance, but there's something missing that doesn't work. And what's happening in part is that they're too much of their training, they put sort of, in the automatic closet so that they can focus on refinement. They can, that even like we talk about, that the quickness of gaze change or the quickness of direction change, or being able to multitask, being able to run really fast down the line, and turn, and then catch the ball like a pillow. Right? So it doesn't bounce back out of the hand, right? So it's being able to even regulate tensions, right? And like I said, like catching the ball with like a pillow, but being highly active in locomotion, right? So I'm going to say one of the transitional links that needs to be discussed is making sure that those unconscious concepts that are just kind of classic, like once you learn that, like put it in the back closet and just focus on the refinement. And I'm going to say no. Take that and transition that back to the conscious. Keep it conscious, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at there. Okay,
and we talked about that too with training our athletes and give them the tools so they can have a clinical eye.
Right.
So, because you want them to be able to be aware when they're messing up and when their teammates messing up. When it's automatic and you're just pulling from it, you're not going to have that sense of awareness to it. You're like, okay, maybe that route felt funny, but what felt funny? What actually happened in that route to lead to that faulty movement pattern where it felt uncomfortable?
And you said, when we were talking just before we started recording, you said there's a football team. And so what did you say? So this is like this caught my attention too.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say who it is though.
Yeah.
But they did just recently play.
Yep. So it's a team that running backs, a lot of them are getting injured and having similar injuries. And immediately I thought, okay, if the athletes are having similar injuries, what are they doing to lead to that injury? What in their training is leading to that? What faulty movement pattern are they not addressing either in their warm-up or in a certain drill or in their when they're in the weight room? What are they doing to lead to a similar
injury? Or even
injury?
in recovery.
Exactly, the recovery process too.
So we said, why do these, what did you say, the running back?
Running backs, yep.
Running backs have ACL tears.
Yep.
So, and there are 3 of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's happening there? It's not that they're, it's just potluck.
Yeah.
Right? And I wouldn't even say it's because they're training too hard. The whole team's training too hard. I'd say that clinical or critical eye is missing in the coaching, right? And also, the conditioning coaches also, right? Yeah. But then also in their sort of rehab PT room, right? But even then amongst the athletes themselves, they're not appraising, like, hey, I've got that too, right? It's like, whoa, okay, everybody stop. Okay, so, and then the last one that we're going to discuss that's involved in core recruitment is
sequential firing.
Right. So sequential firing means in part that you're doing the proximal to distal concept, right? But then you're firing into ground force reaction, right? Before you make your move, before you make your turn, right? So you're borrowing activation from the ground, right? So activation in the ground. What am I doing right now? I'm landing in the cornstarch, right? So, and it doesn't make sense yet, but it will. So what I'm saying is that the force to the foot stabilized is then transfers to the core, and then the core can do the transitional links. But you can't do transitional links absent of some activation.
And exactly what you just said, we're also when we're using ground force reaction, we're borrowing the stability from the ground, because the ground is not moving, the ground is solid. Right. So as soon as we push on the ground, okay, now we have a point, it's a check. Okay, now we can break. Since we got that everything locked, everything stable, now we can make a safe cut versus trying to make a cut when you're not stable, and that leads to
right. And and then our classic example of that is, coming here and then turning, out of stability, or like, oh, I'm going to turn here, right? And you see it. I see it like, just like on the U.S. Open.
Oh yeah.
Like, you just look at their footwork, and you can tell who gets it and who doesn't. Now, it doesn't matter that my hip is over here. What matters is that I've gone into supination, right? Pronation and supination. Let's not even call it supination or pronation. Let's just say I'm not stable. Let's just call it a mess, right? So anyway, just quickly, just wrap this up. So core involves spinal stability, ground force reaction, proximal to distal activation, transitional link, including upper and lower, and conscious to unconscious, and then sequential firing. But then there's something I didn't put on the note board, and it's your favorite word ever.
It's proprioception.
Proprioception, man. Okay, so now let's talk about the definition. Now, we just did the spinal stability 1, 2, 3. And so I made an important point there, and that is that any definition is subject to the definers. So if you ask us, we're going to look at it from a rehab fix point of view, right? What's the fix? So the core, so sometimes what happens is the core activation is just missing. So the fix is to teach core activation. Or there could be incomplete core activation, right? Or a portion of core activation isn't understood by the athlete or by the patient, for example, proximal to distal, right? So there's that. Then we say, oh, how do we define through the performance lens, right? So what's core activation as defined in athletic training, right? So we might even call that like refinement, right? Because a lot of athletes, you know, they get core activation, but there's some element of it that doesn't suit or isn't fulfilling sort of that higher level of
performance, because like we were just talking about, like dealing with athletes, you know, and we had the video, so watch it on eliteness, and getting to eliteness, addressing a faulty movement pattern and teaching the clinical eye, because if you don't have that, then you're going to keep doing what you saw others do, and what coaches that, you know, they thought it worked for them in the past, but now more research has shown certain things lead to certain injuries, and they're stuck in their old ways and not wanting to change. So that's another in-depth look at, you know, the performance side.
Right, and so we could even say, how does that relate to our message today? And that is, they may have sort of a, you know, a old school core
approach,
right, and it just needs to be updated.
Exactly.
Right, and so they can watch this and kind of get a little help. And then the third way sort of defining the core is through just talking about anatomy.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, let's go through the three definitions individually. Okay. And then we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back. Okay, so let's finish this up. Okay, so let's define the core through rehab in this concept of the fix, right? Okay. So I come to you and I'm like, yeah, my knee hurts here when I run, right? So I'm sort of a mid-distance runner, not a track runner. We'll say like cross country, what do we call it, like trail running, right? I just do it for fun.
Mid-distance type of.
Right. So I'm kind of getting into, you know, the running that's got a nice rhythm to it. You know, I'm trying to create some length when I run, right? And so, but part of my problem is when I run, and I don't know this already, but I look down. Okay, and that's a problem. Yep. Because if you look over on the wall here, what do I have? A horizon line. Yep. Right. So part of your ability to be able to steer your body to actually perform in higher level core neutrality.
The gaze.
Right. Is my gaze and a horizon line. So you can do this drill in your office, right? It's super easy. So you notice I've got a dot and I've got a horizon line. It doesn't have to be exactly super level. I just took a guess. The idea is that it's pretty level. So when I look at that and I run, all of a sudden, like I'm running a little sideways looking at that horizon line, right? This is an exaggeration. I'm running a little sideways, but when I look down, right, I'm changing how I run because I don't have a horizon line, right? So how do you solve that? So I'm just out in a field and there's nothing level. And even when I'm running, I'm not running on a level surface. I don't have a horizon line. So how do I solve that?
When you're on a hill, where are we at exactly?
Anywhere. I'm going, you know, I'm going through forest. And there's no horizon line. So I'm just going to get to the point. I have my pelvis. Right? So if I can learn proprioceptively how to keep my pelvis level when I run, this can become a horizon line. Right? Now I'm kind of stretching this out because, you know, this is what we do. But what I want to say is, it's essential to build the relationship with your own. You could build a horizon line in here, but you got to start with that. that trains this, and then you take this out into the field, right?
Got you.
So it's like early navigation back in the day, before GPS.
You know what?
Right?
That makes so much sense, because like we were talking about before, you train in a corrective movement pattern. Yes. And you acclimate to it.
Yes.
Then you know what feels right when you have proper when you have a proper gaze. So you can take what you've done with that line and apply it to obviously
build it into here.
Exactly.
So, and then I'm not as diligent as he is about proprioception. Although, you know, I talk about it all the time. But what I'm saying is that you can build that self-sense, right? And know when I'm moving, right? So let's take a short break, and then we're going to come back. Well, we're back, and let's go ahead and continue with our conversation about core neutrality. So we were talking just before the break on that there are definitions, and the definitions kind of depend on
the parameters that you set.
Right, yeah. the definer. So what we want to do is we want to be inclusive and involve all of the disciplines. So we're talking about the rehab, the performance, and anatomically. So let's just take a look at the anatomical part, right? So why don't you go ahead and stand up. And so we talk a lot about the slings.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know what the slings are, we're basically talking about groups of muscles that act together to perform a single movement, right? So I wouldn't say like there's not really a sling for like a push, right? But there are slings when the work crosses the spine and crosses the core. So we're talking about left to right and top to bottom. So one of those actions would be as simple as taking a step. So you'll notice that this arm is forward, this arm is back, and the opposite leg is forward. So when the shoulder rolls forward here, this hip is forward, that's creating some closure from top to bottom and left to right. So, and that's also true in the reverse. So if I take a step forward here, right, so this hand went back and this foot went back, and that's very natural. So there's a sling that crosses over there. So we care about slings because slings are the outer unit of the core. So the inner unit would be the deep anatomy, which is the abdominal, right?
Which is more visceral, closer to our spine.
Exactly, right? That fluid ball. So we're talking about the respiratory diaphragm, we're talking about the pelvic floor, the transversus, we're not talking about rectus abdominis, and then multifidus, and then I would argue also for quadratus lumborum and for serratus posterior, right? Because the serratus posterior has that kind of closure, right? So go ahead and turn around. So we're going to start, show the folks your back there and just step apart a little bit. So I'm going to have you reach your arm out to the side. So the lat is attached here and then crosses down, comes across here, across the sacrotuberous ligament, and then attaches down here on the glute. Okay, so that is a superficial sling. So if you just relax your arm here, I just wanted to point out that the lat is attached underneath the arm there. Okay, so if you just take a step to the rear with your right foot, just natural step posterior, right? So you're going to notice that this leg went back, this glute is activated, this arm went back, this lat is activated. So you'll notice it's going from left to right and top to bottom. So in this particular case, the lat insertion is here, the origin is down here on the pelvis, and then the lumbar spine. This is all fascia here, right? That's all tendon.
And connective fascia.
Right, tendinous connection, right? It's like a sheet. And then the muscle fibers begin to, they fan out from that, and then they merge and they attach in a single pinpoint here, right? And then the same is true with the glute. So the glute is attached on the hip, not on the sacrum, here, and then inserts down here onto the femur. And then the common denominator here is that thoracolumbar fascia in the center. So when this muscle activates and contracts, it's actually pulling up. And when the glute contracts, it's pulling down, right? So the fascia and that tendinous sheet that's in between becomes tensioned. And then that tension activates into spinal stability.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, so go ahead and turn around, show the folks your front. Now there are several slings. These are the most superficial. And then we have another one here, which is, I'm going to come around the back just for completeness. So that's transversus, starts back here, comes across here, and then lands down here, actually, in that adductor here. So transversus contracting is pulling this way, right? Pulling this way, and then adductor is pulling up and in. Sorry, there's a little corner right there. So what I want you to do again is just take a step forward with your right foot.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I want you to notice that this becomes activated here and transversus becomes activated here, right? So when you go into this activation, if you could just hold your position and carefully turn around.
You want me to hold it and turn?
Yeah, just take, yeah, good. Now you're noticing that the transversus is getting shorter here and adductor is getting longer. So when he rapidly accelerates to the front, go, right, he gets that forced closure. That's the function of the sling, okay? And then go ahead and relax. So those are two examples of superficial slings. And their relationship to core activation is that they cross from top to bottom and from side to side, right? Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is, we're going to go back to that horizon line. So we talked a little bit about, just for completeness before the break, so what we talked about is the possibility, like you said, of learning, right, using a tool of the horizon line and building proprioceptively into the pelvis, and then having that be our sort of navigation, right?
Yeah.
So then we could also even say that we're going to, at some point, progress, and we're going to remove the horizon line altogether, and now we're just going to use a point of reference, right? So the next logical step would be, now can I make neutral out of a point of reference, right? So you have to have a gazing point. There can't be no gazing point.
Yeah.
So let's say you were out, let's say on a trail. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, far mountain gazing. So it's sort of like looking out into the distance and finding a point and continuing to move to that point, and that point continues like, so it's like you're looking at a mountain that's 7 mountain ranges away.
Yeah.
Right? Through the trees, through the fog, through the mountain. And you're gazing at that point, and that point helps you start to focus rather than seeing things that pass by you. Right? So that's just a tool that you can use.
Yeah, I remember when we talked about it in the video when I was explaining about the hurdles, using the hurdles as a gaze point, but I'm not looking at the hurdle that I'm going over. It's the next hurdle I'm looking at. When I'm going over the hurdle that's in front of me, my gaze is already on the next one. So
yeah, and that's perfect, and that's helping you
stay level and get over the hurdle as quick as possible and on to the next. So
when we're trying to understand the core is not laying on the floor doing crunches. Right? For sure it's not. Okay? There's no ground force reaction. There's no reaction to anything. There has to be a reaction. Okay, so we have lots of Nike boxes here.
Plenty.
All right, so I want you to face the folks there and then put a hand on each side, flat like this, and I want you to come
facing upright.
So yeah, core neutral position. Okay. Yeah, and then just hands out here like that. Yeah. So one thing that the core does is it completes a disassociated motion. So I'll say it again. The one thing that the core does, it's one of its objectives, is to complete disassociated movements. Okay, so it's going to help with that. What does disassociated mean? It means that the upper body and the lower body are doing two different things. For example, his upper body is going to rotate, and his lower body, right, mobility, and the lower body is going to stay stable. Stability, right? So let's show them what that looks like. Right. So you notice that he's somewhere in his T-spine, he's getting a rotation point, somewhere T9, T10. We had that thoracolumbar series, you know, they could watch that. Okay, so one of the jobs of the core is to make sure that he's able to rotate his upper body while, by reference, counter-rotating the lower body. Now this seems like a really simple drill. Come back to neutral. I'll take the box. Seems like a really simple drill, but it's a great demonstration of the value of the core. Now, that's not a simple drill either. No. Right? So a lot of people
feel it with a light little shoebox like that. You feel the activation.
Right. And so people think that core drills are like, you know, burpees and, you know, these big high action. But I'm going to argue that a smaller action actually involves more work than a bigger action, right? Because it has that high level even of, we say finesse, we could almost drop in elite, right? Okay, so the other thing I wanted to mention here is that we've joked about this before, and we've always said we're going to show them this, right? Is the dead bug. Yeah. Okay, so classically the dead bug is performed either like, I've seen it laying on a floor or laying on the mat or even like on a BOSU, right? And so the problem with that is there's no ground force reaction, right? There's nothing happening there. So go ahead and put the ball like somewhere here on your legs, and then your elbows, I want you to be, so yeah, so dead bug is classically like 90, move the ball down towards your knees a little more. Good. Yep, and then hands apart, 90-90, fingers fanning up. Good. Draw your belly in away from the ball. Okay, can you put your elbows a little higher on the top? Yeah, even up on the top. Good, there you go. Good, just like that. Good. Now, I'm going to have you pitch down a little, come into back extension. Good, actively fan your fingers. Okay, now that's already a bit of a challenge, but we don't really have any force, right? So this is our argument about it being ground force reaction or sports force reaction, okay? So I want you to drive your elbows down into the ball. Drive your elbows down into the ball, good. And then I want you to gently release, and we're gonna go like this. Core activation, right? Proximal to distal. Release. Yeah. Now don't hold your breath. Exhale, release, and activate. Good. Take a big breath in. Yeah. Now make it more sudden and more subtle, less big. Good. Separate your hands. Good. Good. Now, is it the repetitions that are the value, or is it the accuracy?
Accuracy.
Right? So he should be thinking to himself, I'm compressing my belly first, then I'm activating my lats, right? Good. And then go ahead and release. So that's great, but that's kind of bilateral, right? So what if we took the same drill and instead, remember how I taped, right? Now, the reason I like this version of the dead bug is that it has a little bit of variation. So I find the ball just sticks a little bit better if I've got a little skin going on there, right? So now what I'm going to do is instead of bilateral here, I'm going to be unilateral, and I'm just going to get a cross reference happening here. I'm going to step back into a lunge, and I'm going to cross drive. So notice I'm pulling into the ball, activating, adductors, and then I'm driving my elbows down and in and back, which is
adduction.
Lats.
Oh, the lats being engaged.
So now I'm activating the sling. I'm in a dead bug. It's a variation of the dead bug, right? So I'm gonna come forward. I'm gonna bring up my foot. I'm gonna put it into the ball, and here we go. I'm gonna bring it up. So I'm adducting, and I'm activating my lat. Now that's still a dead bug, right? You get it? So I'm cross driving. I'm driving this way here. My vector is here, and my vector is underneath and up and in. Here, here, right? So that's an example of activating the core, proximal to distal, utilizing a sling, and taking something that's probably very dysfunctional in the usual sense, right? We were and turning it into something really cool. And looking at a video.
Did like, sorry,
I said,
only did like 3 of them.
What do you know about?
And I'm like super burnt.
So let's just sit down because we want to talk about something really amazing. I want you to do a search that I shared with Venzel today. So cornstarch. And so, you know, do a search for that and look and see what that is. Now, the story that goes behind that is pretty amazing, because it could change everything you think about recruitment, right? So most people think that exercise is like a 2-phase that has an eccentric, concentric phase, right? It's got a hold phase. It's got, you know, out and back, like there's some action to be seen, right? Heavier is better, more range of motion is better, whatever that story is, right? But what isn't described or discussed is acceleration. And the value of acceleration in rehab or in training. That quickness, and we've said that over and over. So I said, go ahead, Google that, right? And so what you see is this long vat of cornstarch and water that's mixed. And if you put your hand in it slowly, your hand will just plunge in. And if you pull your hand out, it'll have all these gooey strings of cornstarch on it, right? It's kind of like flour dough. Now, and I told you this was going to happen before you saw the video. Now that same vat of cornstarch, if you get over it and you hit it really fast with a big flat hand, pat, right? It smacks. And your hand is clean and it's dry. And you can see the whole vat of cornstarch, right? Radiate. So this is the message. The message is the core responds just like the cornstarch does. Fast, quick movements, sudden movements, command more from the architecture of the body than slow movements, and that's classical PT. That's classic rehab. Just, you know, extend your leg, bring it in, extend your leg, you know, just be careful, how's it feel? Now I'm not picking on physical therapy, I'm trying not to, but the point is that there's something else. Now back to the cornstarch. So they had this long vat of cornstarch, and if you muscle up with some speed, you can run across the top of the cornstarch if your feet are flat, and you go right all the way across. And you're going to hear that, right? It's on Ellen, actually, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was on an old episode of Ellen.
Yeah. So the idea is, if there's enough quickness, the cornstarch responds. Now, cornstarch isn't alive. It doesn't have a nerve supply. It's responding because the molecules do that. So then I said, mind blower, I said, disc material is made the same way. It's designed so that when the movement is slow, it's more like gel. when the spine is suddenly abruptly approached,
It's more like a solid.
it becomes more like a solid.
Yeah.
So then I said, you know, and of course you reacted differently.
Yeah.
He was like, oh my God, show him what you did. Show him what you did.
I was like, wow. Like it was because I've never
You were
thought
like
about the
shaking
spine.
your head.
I didn't think of the spine.
You were like holding
that.
your temple. You were like, oh my, oh no, right? And then I said, so the cornstarch is the same as the disc material is the same as that thoracolumbar fascia, or maybe any fascia, or specifically ligaments and tendons, right? Which are those gags, like glucosaminoglycans, right? So that structure that's pliable, but that can also lock up. So the mistake is that muscles are creating the tone and the tension. All the muscles are doing is creating the quick tension, and the connective tissue is actually doing the stability, and it doesn't have a nerve supply. So when the muscle pulls, quick, right, that connective tissue or those ligaments and tendons harden and create stability.
And that goes right into what we were talking about earlier when you asked me about spinal stability. It was like so much of the information that we just took in, like I was trying to come up with the best way to, you know, disseminate that information, but it was just what you just said, it clicked for me, because dealing with the force, the load, the shear, the torsion,
right?
Because of that has to do with that compressive force and the shearing force and the rotating force. Our spine responds not only axially, but if we're in, like we were talking about being in the water, now we're pushing against the water. That's another force we have to deal with. So the resistance from the water.
And the water sort of responds similarly as the cornstarch does, right?
Yeah.
And I did a basketball drill, and we talked about, for a swimmer, and we talked about reaching and grabbing a basketball full of water and pulling the water, pulling a basketball wad of water back so that you can actually climb through the water, right? Using the water as resistance, not just swimming through the water.
Passively. Yep.
Right. So the idea is that there's that quickness. Now I didn't put a board up here, but the formula for force is F equals mass times acceleration.
Yeah.
Force equals mass times acceleration. Now, if we're doing rehab and there's no acceleration, if A equals 0.
This is where it got me, guys. This is where it got me.
Right? Then F equals M times 0. So
which is 0.
So force equals 0. Now listen, because this is important. We're about to tell you it's possible that muscle training isn't the solution. It isn't even the strength. It isn't the vector. It isn't the range of motion. It's the speed at which the muscle is commanded and how that forced contraction acts on what we call hard tissue, the capsule, ligaments, tendons, fascia, right? All of that.
Yeah.
Its response creates the stability. So when we're talking about core neutral, we're not talking about, fluffy movements that are, like a burpee, right? Now there's a way to do a burpee where there's that quickness, there's a drive, right? But I'm not going to do a burpee. But, you come down, you jump up, and I'll even turn and face this way. So, I jump up and I go like this, right? There's nothing.
And it was so much instability in that movement specifically, like how we talk about if you're going to jump and you land on a plantar flex foot, that's instability in the knee and the hip. you want to have some springiness to it, so you want to slightly point the toe to the sky so you can absorb that force and translate it.
Right. So that's different than.
Yep.
This is the elastic property, right? Now you could probably get some stability out of that. It doesn't necessarily need to be harder, right? So the point of this is to tell you that we're just fascinated by cornstarch. And that it really, like in real time, started to evolve into this completely new appreciation and direction. And the reason why we do these videos is to explore, right? And we're super curious. So anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, and then specifically staying on that point of when I was talking about the load and the shearing and the torsion force on our spine, when we have that force, once the force is alleviated, it goes back to that shape of that fluid-like or jelly-like state. So now you have that fluidity in movement once you go into like say if we were posting, going in a hard post, and then we're lifting, you want to have some springiness to it. So you want to have a fluid.
So it's another phase.
Exactly.
Right. We're not saying, we want you to be
stiff.
This is stability, right?
Yeah.
So we want to say that there's a phase where there's some stability in that movement, even like, if you're running, right? You're not just, it's not here. There's, there's that snap, right? That's in the movement pattern. Okay, so again, we've kind of tortured some sort of like conventional thinking into something new and having a really good time. And honestly, we're enjoying doing these and getting your feedback and such. Thank you so much, and I hope this helped you understand more about the core. We get asked about it all the time. Do something a little bit more extensive. And I know you're going to say, okay, so what are some core exercises? And the answer is everything should be a core. It's possible.
Core should be in any movement. Any movement core should be engaged.
Yes, especially if you're searching for sort of that eliteness.
Exactly.
But also if you're not searching for eliteness and you're looking for safety in your movement, you don't want to be injured, then that's a really good start. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dr. Dean.
Venzel.
We'll see you again.